Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The Galactic Combat Institute sat in the cold embrace of space like a jewel someone had forgotten to polish. Orbital Platform Helix 9, they called it. Though most beings who'd spent any time there called it other things, usually involving profanity in at least 3 languages. It wasn't that the facility lacked prestige. Oh no, quite the opposite. This was where the galaxy's elite warriors came to train, to test themselves against the absolute best the universe had to offer. The problem, if you could call it that, was the Institute's success rate at humbling even the most arrogant specimens who walked through its doors. And there were a lot of arrogant specimens. On this particular morning, well, morning by station time, since actual celestial mechanics didn't give a damn about anyone's circadian rhythms, the main training observation deck buzzed with the usual pre-session energy. Trainees from 24 species clustered in their respective groups, sizing each other up with the kind of casual hostility that comes naturally to apex predators who suddenly find themselves in the same room. Bonnie stood near the viewport, coffee in hand, watching the organized chaos with the expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out about 1,000 times before. She was human, which made her something of an oddity at the Institute. Not because humans were rare in the galaxy, they'd spread like a particularly determined fungus once they'd gotten their hands on faster-than-light travel, but because most species still couldn't quite figure out where humanity fit in the great cosmic food chain. Too soft to be apex predators, they said. Too aggressive to be prey. Too adaptable to be specialists. Too specialized in their adaptability to be, well, the circular logic usually ate itself at that point. Bonnie didn't much care what they thought. She had coffee, she had a paycheck, and she had the quiet satisfaction of knowing something the rest of the galaxy hadn't quite figured out yet. Were terrifying. Not obviously terrifying, mind you. Not like the Enthrene with their acid blood and chitinous armor. Not like the Bolgarath who could bench press a small spacecraft. Not even like the notoriously vicious Pelthari, who'd evolved on a death world where everything, including the plants, wanted to kill you. No, humans were terrifying in a much more subtle way, which made it so much worse when people finally figured it out. "Instructor Bonnie," a voice chittered from behind her, all harmonics and clicking mandibles. "The morning session begins in 10 minutes. Will you be joining us in the observation gallery?" Bonnie turned to find Hixaline standing there, compound eyes glittering with what might have been amusement. The station commander was insectoid, vaguely mantis-like if mantises stood 2 meters tall and wore tailored uniforms. Hixaline had been running the Institute for the better part of 15 cycles and had developed the kind of patient exasperation that came from managing hundreds of ego-drunk warriors who all thought they were the galaxy's gift to combat. "Wouldn't miss it," Bonnie said, taking another sip of coffee. "Who's running the drills today?" "Ormhack has requested the honor," Hixaline said, and there was definitely amusement in those clicking syllables now. "He wishes to demonstrate proper technique to the newer trainees." Bonnie snorted. "Of course he does." Ormhack was exactly the kind of trainee that made Bonnie's job both incredibly easy and incredibly tedious. He was Nalthixian, one of the apex predator species from the outer bands. His people had evolved on a high-gravity world where everything was a competition, and second place meant being someone's dinner. They were tall, powerfully built, with muscle density that made them absurdly strong by most species' standards. Their reflexes were lightning quick, their senses sharp enough to track prey across kilometers, and their culture had spent millennia perfecting the art of personal combat. In short, Ormhack was an absolute nightmare in a fight. And he knew it. That was the problem. The observation deck began to fill as the session time approached. Trainees filed in, some still nursing beverages, others already limbering up as if watching combat drills was itself a physical activity. Bonnie found her usual spot near the railing that overlooked the main training floor, a massive space that could be reconfigured into dozens of different combat scenarios at the push of a button. "I'm telling you," a voice boomed from somewhere to her left. "The Nalthixian form is superior in every measurable way. Strength, speed, tactical instinct. We've evolved it all." Bonnie didn't need to look to know it was Ormhack. The guy had two modes, fighting and talking about fighting. Sometimes he managed both simultaneously, which was actually kind of impressive. "What about the Pelthari nerve strike technique?" another voice countered. "That would be Pollux, a trainee from one of the methane-breathing species. He and Ormhack had been engaged in a low-level rivalry since day one, the kind that was mostly posturing but occasionally erupted into actual competition. Your people have no answer for paralytic attacks." "We have an answer," Ormhack shot back. "Don't get hit." Several trainees laughed. Bonnie hid her smile behind her coffee cup. "Besides," Ormhack continued, warming to his subject in that way supremely confident beings always did, "the Pelthari evolved their techniques fighting prey animals. The Nalthixians evolved ours fighting each other. There's a difference between hunting and warfare." "Interesting distinction," Bonnie said, not looking up from her coffee. The observation deck went quiet in that particular way that meant everyone suddenly remembered there was a human in the room. Ormhack turned, his large amber eyes fixing on Bonnie with the intensity of a predator that had just noticed movement in the underbrush. "Instructor," he said, and there was something in his tone that made Bonnie's internal warning systems perk up. "Do you disagree?" "Didn't say that," Bonnie replied mildly. "Just said it was interesting." Ormhack moved closer, and Bonnie had to give him credit. He had presence. He stood nearly half a meter taller than her, with shoulders that looked like they'd been carved from stone and a jaw that could probably bite through hull plating. His species' traditional combat marks traced patterns down his arms, each one representing a victory in ritual combat. The guy was, objectively speaking, a certified badass. "You humans," Ormhack said, and oh, here we go, Bonnie thought. "You've been in the Galactic community for what, 3 generations? And you presume to instruct species who've been perfecting combat for millennia?" "I presume to cash my paycheck," Bonnie said. "The instructing is just what they pay me for." More laughter, but nervous now. The trainees could sense something building, the way herd animals could sense an approaching storm. Ormhack's expression shifted, lips pulling back from teeth that were definitely designed for ripping flesh. It wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't quite a threat either. It existed in that dangerous middle ground where egos lived. "I mean no disrespect," he said, in the tone of someone who absolutely meant disrespect. "But humans are, what is the term? Generalists? You have no natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no specialized adaptations. You're soft-skinned, slow, fragile. In the natural order, you're prey species who got lucky with technology." The observation deck had gone completely silent now. Even Hixaline had stopped moving, compound eyes fixed on the unfolding scene with the air of someone watching a disaster in slow motion. Bonnie set down her coffee cup carefully. "You think I'm prey?" "I think your species survived by being clever enough to avoid predators," Ormhack said. "There's no shame in that. But don't confuse survival with being apex. You lack the fundamental nature of a warrior." "Huh," Bonnie said. She looked at Ormhack for a long moment, her expression utterly neutral. "You know what? You might be right. Ormhack blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. I mean, Bonnie continued, you've obviously studied this. You've got the evolutionary advantages, the cultural heritage, the physical prowess. Meanwhile, I'm just a little human who probably can't handle herself in a real fight. I didn't mean, Ormhack started, but Bonnie talked right over him. Tell you what, she said, her voice still perfectly pleasant. Why don't we test your theory? You and me in the Crucible. Full contact simulation. That way, everyone here can see exactly what a prey species looks like when it tries to play warrior. The silence that followed could have been weaponized. Pollux made a sound that might have been a gasp, or might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell with methane breathers. Hickseline's antennae went completely rigid. Ormhack stared at Bonnie like she'd just suggested they both jump out an airlock without spacesuits. The Crucible, he said slowly. You're challenging me to full-contact combat in the Crucible? Unless you think that wouldn't be fair, Bonnie said, all innocence. I mean, you're absolutely right, that I don't have natural weapons or enhanced strength. So if you'd rather not... I accept, Ormhack said immediately, because of course he did. There was no way his ego would let him back down now, not in front of the entire trainee corps. Bonnie smiled. It was the kind of smile that should have been a warning, but Ormhack was too busy basking in his own certainty to notice. Excellent, she said. How's tomorrow morning sound? Give everyone time to clear their schedules. Something tells me this is going to be educational. The news spread through orbital platform Helix 9 like a particularly virulent virus. By lunch hour, every being on the station knew about the challenge. By dinner, betting pools had spontaneously materialized in at least 8 different recreation areas. By the time the night shift clocked in, the match had become the most anticipated event in Institute history. Bonnie spent the afternoon doing paperwork. This, apparently, was hilarious to everyone who saw her. Trainees kept peeking into her office, expecting to find her doing, well, something. Meditating, maybe. Reviewing combat footage. Practicing esoteric human martial arts. Something that would indicate she understood the magnitude of what she'd agreed to. Instead, she was filling out equipment requisition forms and drinking terrible station coffee. You know, Hicceline said, manifesting in her doorway with that unnerving silence insectoids seem to specialize in, it's not too late to cancel. I could cite medical concerns, safety protocols, diplomatic considerations. Diplomatic considerations? Bonnie didn't look up from her tablet. The Nalthixian embassy is going to complain about their golden boy getting some exercise? The Nalthixian embassy is going to complain when their golden boy accidentally kills a human instructor in front of 300 witnesses, Hicksleen said flatly, which raises questions about our safety protocols, our supervision standards, and whether the Institute should even allow humans in combat instructor positions. Now, Bonnie did look up. You think Ormhack is going to kill me? Hickslene's mandibles clicked, in what might have been frustration. I think Ormhack masses 60 kilograms more than you, can bench press 3 times his body weight, and comes from a species that literally evolved to be perfect killing machines. So yes, Bonnie, I'm concerned about the mortality risk. Touching, Bonnie said. I'll try not to bleed on anything expensive. This isn't funny. It kind of is, though. Hicksleen moved closer, lowering their voice, even though there was no one else in the office. I've seen your file, the redacted parts. I know you're more capable than you let on. But there's capable, and then there's suicidal. Ormhack isn't some drunk soldier in a bar fight. He's a trained Nalthixian warrior in his prime, and he's going to come at you with everything he has. Good, Bonnie said simply. Good? If he holds back, people will say the match was fixed. This way, everyone gets to see exactly what happens when a big scary apex predator goes all out against a soft little human. Bonnie smiled. Should be illuminating. Hixaline stared at her for a long moment, compound eyes utterly unreadable. Finally, they clicked their mandibles in resignation. The medical team will be standing by. Try to stay conscious long enough for them to reach you. You're a real optimist, you know that? I'm a realist who's going to have to file incident reports regardless of how this ends. After Hixaline left, Bonnie finished her paperwork, ate a sandwich from the station commissary, and took a nap on her office couch. When she woke up 3 hours later, she checked her messages and found 218 new notifications. Most were bets being placed. 3 were from other human instructors on the station, all variations of, "What the hell are you doing?" 1 was from Ormhack himself. She opened it. Instructor Bonnie, I want you to know I hold no personal animosity toward you. Tomorrow, I will demonstrate the superiority of Nalthixian combat technique with respect and honor. I hope you understand this is nothing personal, merely an educational opportunity for all involved. May your ancestors guide you. Ormhack. Bonnie read it twice, then typed back, Cool. See you tomorrow. She didn't mention ancestors. Humanity's ancestors had been too busy inventing increasingly horrible ways to kill each other to offer much in the way of spiritual guidance. That evening, Bonnie made her way to the observation lounge that overlooked the crucible. The arena sat dormant now, a massive oval space that could be reconfigured into hundreds of different combat scenarios. Mountains, jungles, urban environments, zero-gravity sections. The crucible could simulate it all. It was where trainees learned that knowing how to fight was different from knowing how to fight anywhere. Through the viewport, she could see Ormhack down in the preparation area, going through what looked like traditional pre-combat rituals. He moved with the fluid precision of someone utterly confident in their body, each gesture deliberate and meaningful. Around him, other Nalthixian trainees had gathered, offering what were probably words of encouragement and tactical advice. Pollux sidled up beside her, his breathing apparatus hissing softly. The betting is currently 99-1 against you. Only 99-1? Bonnie said. I'm insulted. 3 beings bet on you. I'm trying to figure out if they know something or if they're just idiots. Could be both. Could be, Pollux agreed. He was quiet for a moment, watching Ormhack below. He's not a bad person, you know. Arrogant, yes. Insufferable, certainly. But not cruel. If you yield early, he'll accept it. Noted, Bonnie said. I'm serious. There's no shame in acknowledging a superior opponent. The Nalthixians respect tactical retreat. That's sweet, Pollux. Really? Bonnie turned to face him. But I'm not planning to retreat. Pollux's breathing apparatus hissed more rapidly, the equivalent of a sigh. Then I hope you have good insurance. The medical reconstruction technology here is excellent, but it's not miracle working. After he left, Bonnie stayed at the viewport for a while longer, watching Ormhack prepare. She wasn't angry at him, which seemed to confuse people when she mentioned it. He was a product of his culture, his evolution, his understanding of the universe. In his worldview, the strong dominated and the weak adapted or died. It was simple, clean, logical. The problem was that humans had never been particularly good at simple, clean, or logical. ID hadn't survived by being the strongest or the fastest. They'd survived by being the most stubbornly persistent things evolution had ever produced. By being the species that looked at a mammoth and thought, I could take that. By being the apes who invented pointy sticks, then better pointy sticks, then pointy sticks that exploded, then orbital platforms where different species gathered to determine who had the best pointy stick techniques. Humans had crawled out of Africa with nothing but sweat glands and spite, and they'd conquered a planet full of things that were bigger, stronger, faster, and better armed. They'd done it by outlasting everything else, by adapting to everything else, by learning from everything else, and most importantly, by never, ever knowing when to quit. Bonnie smiled at her reflection in the viewport. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The next morning arrived with the inevitability of bad decisions coming home to roost. By the time Bonnie reached the crucible preparation area, the observation galleries were packed. Not just with trainees. Word had spread to the station's civilian population, the support staff, even some off-duty transport crews who'd been passing through and decided this was too good to miss. Hixaline met her at the entrance, looking like they'd aged several cycles overnight. Last chance to reconsider. And disappoint my fans? Bonnie gestured at the packed galleries. I couldn't do that to them. Your funeral, Hixaline muttered. The crucible had been configured to a standard combat arena, roughly 200 meters in diameter, with varied terrain including rock formations, scattered equipment caches, and enough environmental hazards to keep things interesting. No weapons beyond what fighters could scavenge from the caches. No rules except stay in the arena and stop when someone yields or loses consciousness. Simple. Brutal. Exactly the kind of fight Ormhack had been training for his entire life. Bonnie stepped onto the arena floor, and the crowd noise swelled to a roar. She waved casually, which seemed to confuse people. Ormhack entered from the opposite side, and the noise doubled. He looked magnificent, all coiled muscle and predatory grace, his combat marks seeming to glow in the arena lighting. He raised both arms to the crowd, basking in their energy. Then he looked across the arena at Bonnie, and his expression went serious. Professional. The referee, a neutral third party from one of the non-combat species, floated to the center of the arena on a small platform. Combatants ready? Ready, Ormhack called. Bonnie just nodded. This is full-contact combat simulation. Match ends when one combatant yields, loses consciousness, or is unable to continue. Lethal force is prohibited. Medical teams are standing by. Begin on my mark. The referee raised one appendage. In the galleries, 300 beings held their breath. The appendage dropped. Ormhack moved. Ormhack crossed 20 meters in about 2 seconds, which was physically impossible for most species and perfectly normal for a Nalthixian in hunting mode. His opening move was a textbook flanking strike. Come in fast, hit hard. Establish dominance before the opponent could even process what was happening. Bonnie sidestepped. Not gracefully. Not with any particular style. She just moved about half a meter to the left, and Ormhack's strike hit empty air where her center mass had been a moment before. He recovered instantly, spinning into a follow-up strike that should have caught her in the ribs. Should have, except Bonnie had already moved again, this time backward, creating just enough distance that his claws, retracted per arena rules, but still dangerous, missed by centimeters. The crowd made a collective sound of surprise. Ormhack pressed the attack, because that's what Nalthixian combat doctrine demanded. Establish dominance early. Overwhelm the opponent with superior speed and strength. End fights quickly, decisively, with no room for doubt about who was apex. He threw a combination that would have hospitalized most beings. Bonnie blocked one strike, redirected another, and took the third one on the shoulder in a way that looked bad, but actually dispersed most of the impact. She stumbled backward, and Ormhack followed, sensing victory. In the observation gallery, Pollux leaned toward one of his fellow trainees. "She's getting destroyed." "Match will be over in under a minute," the other trainee agreed. They were both wrong, but they didn't know it yet. Bonnie continued to retreat, taking hits that made the crowd wince. Ormhack was toying with her now, landing strikes that hurt but didn't incapacitate, drawing out the inevitable. He was teaching a lesson, demonstrating the gulf between apex and prey. This continued for almost 3 minutes. Then Bonnie stopped retreating. It wasn't dramatic. There was no moment of transformation, no sudden power-up. She just stopped moving backward and started moving sideways instead, circling, maintaining distance. Ormhack adjusted his approach, cutting off her angles, but she kept circling. He lunged again, faster this time, and she dodged again, but differently, more efficiently, like she'd figured out exactly how much movement was necessary and wasn't wasting energy on anything extra. In his private box, a Nalthixian military observer leaned forward slightly. "Interesting." "What?" his aide asked. "She's been analyzing him. Those first 3 minutes weren't her losing. She was learning." Down in the arena, Ormhack was starting to realize the same thing. His strikes were landing less frequently. When they did land, Bonnie was positioned, so they did minimal damage. She wasn't fighting him yet. She was studying him like he was a particularly complicated math problem. The crowd noise changed pitch, uncertainty creeping in. Ormhack growled, an actual primal sound that resonated in the chest cavity, and accelerated his attacks. He was stronger, faster, better trained. This soft little human couldn't just decide to stop being prey. Except she kind of could. Bonnie ducked under a strike that would have taken her head off, came up inside Ormhack's guard, and drove an elbow into his solar plexus. Not hard enough to do real damage, but hard enough to make him grunt and back up a step. First point to the human. The crowd went absolutely berserk. Ormhack's eyes widened slightly. That had actually hurt. Not much, but enough to register. He reassessed, falling back on his training, approaching more cautiously. Good, Bonnie thought. He's thinking now instead of just attacking. They circled each other, and the crowd noise faded to a tense murmur. This wasn't the quick, brutal demonstration everyone had expected. This was becoming an actual fight. Ormhack feinted left, struck right. Bonnie read it, blocked, countered with a strike to his knee that made him shift his weight. She was targeting joints, looking for weaknesses in his stance. He adapted, protecting his joints better, but that meant changing his attack patterns. Every adjustment he made, she countered. Every counter she made, he adapted to. It was becoming a conversation, conducted in violence. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. The Nalthixian observer was sitting upright now, all pretense of casual observation gone. She's not getting tired. What? The aide said. Look at her breathing. Look at her movement efficiency. She's not getting tired. There was something like horror in his voice. How is she not getting tired? Because humans were persistence hunters, though nobody in the arena had quite figured that out yet. Because humanity's ancestors had chased prey across the African savanna for hours, for days, if necessary, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Because humans had evolved the most efficient cooling system in the animal kingdom, and the ability to just keep going long after any sensible organism would have quit. Ormhack was beginning to understand this, and it was terrifying. He was faster than Bonnie, stronger, better reflexes, denser muscle, superior reach. By every measurable metric, he should be winning. But he was breathing hard now, and she wasn't. His strikes were still powerful, but they were getting slower, predictable. His muscles were flooding with metabolic byproducts that his physiology couldn't clear as efficiently as hers could. Bonnie, meanwhile, was just warming up. She shifted from defensive to offensive so smoothly that it took the crowd a moment to notice. Suddenly, she was the one pressing, forcing Ormhack to react instead of act. Her strikes were precise, targeted, accumulating damage in ways that wouldn't be obvious until suddenly they were. Ormhack blocked a kick to his knee, but blocking meant he couldn't counter. She struck at his ribs, his shoulders, his supporting leg. None of the hits were devastating individually, but they added up. Death by 1,000 cuts, except these cuts were delivered by a species that had invented the concept. 20 minutes in, Ormhack made a mistake. It was tiny. He shifted his weight wrong coming out of a block. On a fresh opponent, it wouldn't have mattered. But he wasn't fresh anymore, and Bonnie had been waiting for exactly this kind of opening. She swept his leg. A Nulthixian warrior, apex predator, pinnacle of his species' combat evolution, hit the arena floor hard enough to bounce. The crowd noise was deafening. Ormhack rolled, came up swinging, but there was panic in his eyes now. The script had gone completely wrong. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. Prey didn't hunt predators. The natural order didn't invert itself. Except sometimes it did, when the prey in question had spent millions of years figuring out how to kill everything else on its planet. Bonnie didn't gloat, didn't showboat. She just kept coming, relentless as a glacier, patient as stone. Every time Ormhack tried to reset, to find his rhythm, she was there, disrupting, adapting, learning. She was in his head now, and they both knew it. The psychological warfare was almost worse than the physical combat. Ormhack had built his entire identity around being apex, being the hunter, being the thing that other things feared. And here was this human, this soft-skinned generalist with no natural weapons and no right to be winning, systematically dismantling everything he believed about himself. 30 minutes in, Ormhack was struggling. His breathing was ragged. His movements had lost their fluid precision. He was running on fumes and willpower only got you so far when your opponent had literally evolved to outlast you. Bonnie, in contrast, looked like she could do this all day. Because she could. Because humans were the species that looked at a marathon and thought, yeah, but what if we made it longer? She caught him with a combination that sent him stumbling backward toward one of the equipment caches. He grabbed onto the cache structure for support, and his hand fell on something metal. A training staff. His eyes lit up. Weapons. Maybe with a weapon, he could regain the advantage, use his superior strength to... Bonnie picked up a staff from a cache on her side of the arena. Oh no, Ormhack thought. They clashed in the center of the arena, staffs meeting with a crack that echoed through the crucible. Ormhack put everything he had left into his strikes, using techniques his people had perfected over millennia. Bonnie blocked them all, then started demonstrating techniques humanity had invented when it got bored with swords and decided to see what else it could kill things with. The staff became an extension of her body, flowing through forms that looked almost like dancing. Except dancing didn't usually involve systematically beating the hell out of your opponent. She spun, struck, redirected Ormhack's attacks back at him with interest. He blocked desperately, but he was fading fast. His arms felt like lead. His legs were shaking. His lungs burned with every breath. And then, Bonnie did something that would be replayed in institute training footage for the next decade. She fainted high with the staff. Ormhack committed to blocking it, and she dropped low, sweeping his legs again. As he fell, She spun, using the momentum to drive the staff down in an overhead strike that would have caved in his chest if she hadn't stopped it exactly 1 centimeter from impact. Ormhack lay on his back, Bonnie's staff hovering over his heart, her expression calm and utterly in control. "Yield," she said quietly. The arena was completely silent. Ormhack stared up at her, chest heaving, every muscle screaming. His pride warred with his survival instinct. The pride said, "Get up, keep fighting, die if necessary, but don't yield to prey." His survival instinct said, "This isn't prey, and if you don't yield, she's going to put you through the floor." "I yield," he gasped. Bonnie stepped back, lowering the staff. The referee's voice cut through the silence. "Match to Instructor Bonnie." For about 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the crowd absolutely exploded. Bonnie helped Ormhack to his feet, which seemed to surprise him. "You fought well," she said. "I lost," he said, still trying to process what had just happened. "You learned," Bonnie corrected. "That's more important." Medical teams rushed onto the floor, scanners out, checking both fighters. Ormhack waved them off irritably. His pride was more injured than his body. Bonnie submitted to a quick scan that showed elevated heart rate and some bruising, but nothing serious. "How?" Ormhack asked as the medics worked. "How are you not exhausted?" Bonnie shrugged. "I went for a jog this morning. This was just my cool down." The look on his face suggested he couldn't tell if she was joking. She was, but only kind of. As they left the arena floor, the crowd still roaring, Ormhack stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "You were never prey," he said slowly. "Were you?" Bonnie smiled. "My species spent 2 million years learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and scarier than us. We got pretty good at it." "I see that now." "Good. That's progress." She clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on. I'll buy you a drink and tell you about this thing humans invented called endurance hunting. You're going to hate it." The aftermath of the match spread through orbital platform Helix 9 like a shockwave through water. Within an hour, footage of the fight had been transmitted to every corner of the galaxy that had Institute affiliations. Within 3 hours, it had gone viral across the intergalactic networks. Within 6 hours, xenobiologists were frantically pulling up human evolutionary history and experiencing the biological equivalent of existential dread. The betting pools paid out, making 3 very smug beings considerably wealthier and leaving roughly 200 others significantly poorer and much wiser. And the Crucible arena had a problem. Bonnie stood in Commander Hickslean's office, looking at the damage assessment report on the commander's holographic display. The finishing move, that overhead strike she'd pulled at the last second, had apparently transferred enough kinetic energy into the arena floor to create microfractures in the underlying support structure. "It's not technically a crater," Hickslean said, mandibles clicking in what Bonnie had learned to recognize as deep exasperation. "But the engineering team is calling it that anyway. They estimate 6 weeks of repairs, possibly 8. "I pulled the strike," Bonnie protested. "You pulled a strike that still registered 0.7 on the impact scale. Do you understand how much force that is? Do you comprehend the amount of kinetic energy required to damage reinforced arena flooring?" Bonnie looked at the report again. "Huh, that's actually pretty impressive. It's expensive is what it is." Hickslean pulled up another display. "Repair costs, replacement materials, labor, recalibration of the arena's environmental systems, it adds up. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're paying for it." Bonnie blinked. "What?" "Institute Regulation 42, subsection 9. Instructors who cause property damage during unauthorized combat scenarios are financially liable for repairs. Hickslene's compound eyes glittered with something that might have been satisfaction. Congratulations, Bonnie. You just bought yourself a very expensive hole in the floor. The combat wasn't unauthorized. Ormhack challenged me in front of witnesses. Ormhack is a trainee. You're an instructor. You could have declined. You could have referred the matter to proper channels. You could have done literally anything except accept a challenge that resulted in— Hickslene gestured at the damage report. This. Bonnie studied the numbers, did some quick mental math, and winced. That's going to take a while to pay off. Indeed, I'm setting up a payment plan. Should be cleared in about 18 months, assuming you don't damage anything else. You know what? Fair. Bonnie shrugged. Add it to my tab. Hickslene's mandibles stopped clicking. You're not going to argue? Would it help? No. Then why waste the breath? Bonnie smiled. Besides, it was worth it. After she left Hickslene's office, Bonnie found herself intercepted by a steady stream of beings who all wanted to talk about the match. Some were trainees looking for training tips. Others were instructors, reassessing their opinions about human combat capabilities. A few were just curious about how a species with no obvious predatory adaptations had managed to take down a Nalthixian in his prime. Pollux caught up with her in the corridor outside the training facilities. I won money on you, he announced without preamble. You bet on me. Bonnie was genuinely surprised. Only a small amount. I'm not stupid. He fell into step beside her. But I had a feeling. The way you accepted the challenge. Too calm, too confident. Either you were suicidal, or you knew something nobody else did. Smart money was on suicidal. Smart money lost. Pollux's breathing apparatus hissed what might have been laughter. The other trainees are terrified of you now. Half of them think you're some kind of secret warrior caste. The other half think you were genetically modified. I'm just a regular human, Bonnie said. That's what's terrifying them. They walked in silence for a moment before Pollux spoke again. Ormhack has been in the medical wing all day. Not because he's injured. The scans cleared him. He just keeps asking the staff to explain human evolutionary biology. I think you broke something in his head. He'll be fine, Bonnie said. Better, probably. Losing builds character. Is that a human saying? It is now. She found Ormhack in one of the recovery rooms, surrounded by holographic displays showing everything from human skeletal structure to thermal regulation systems. He looked up when she entered, and his expression was complicated. Part embarrassment, part fascination, part something that might have been respect. Instructor, he said, standing quickly. Too quickly, he winced and sat back down. Relax. You took some hits today. Bonnie pulled up a chair. How are you feeling? Physically? Sore but functional? Mentally? He gestured at the displays. I've been reading about your species for the past 6 hours, and every new thing I learn makes the loss make more sense and feel worse, simultaneously. Yeah, human biology is kind of horrifying when you think about it. Ormhack pulled up a display showing human temperature regulation. You can run for hours in heat that would kill most species. Your cooling system is so efficient that you can literally chase prey until it dies from exhaustion. Persistence hunting told you that you'd hate it. And your pattern recognition, another display, this one showing neural pathway comparisons. You can analyze combat styles in real time and adapt. I was teaching you how to beat me while I was trying to beat you. You're a good teacher, Bonnie said with a slight smile. Ormhack leaned back, looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. I called you prey. I dismissed your entire species as soft generalists who got lucky, and you let me keep talking, knowing exactly what you were going to do to me. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. Then what were you trying to do? Bonnie considered the question. Teach, same as always. You needed to learn that strength isn't just about muscle density and reflex speed, that being apex is about more than physical advantages. So you beat me into the floor as a lesson plan? I prefer to think of it as hands-on education. That startled a laugh out of him, which turned into a wince. Everything hurts. That's the other thing about humans. We're really good at making things hurt. Bonnie stood up. Get some rest. When you're cleared for training again, I'll show you some techniques, if you want. Ormhack looked at her for a long moment. I would like that. And, instructor? I apologize for what I said about humans being prey. Apology accepted, but for what it's worth. Bonnie paused at the door. We were prey once, about 2 million years ago. Then we got creative. Over the next few days, the Institute returned to something resembling normal operations, except everything was different in subtle ways. Trainees who'd previously dismissed human instructors started paying closer attention in their classes. The other human staff reported sudden interest in their teaching methods and combat philosophies. And the Crucible Arena, with its new crater, structural damage, became something of a tourist attraction. Beings would make excuses to walk past it, to look at the impact point, to try to calculate exactly how much force had been required to damage reinforced flooring. The engineering team had put up barriers and warning signs, but that just made it more popular. Someone had scratched graffiti into one of the barriers. Bonnie's reminder. The name stuck. Commander Hixaline tried to have it removed twice, but it kept reappearing. Eventually, they gave up and let it stand. Some battles weren't worth fighting. The new trainee intake arrived the following week. Fresh recruits from a dozen species, all eager to prove themselves at the galaxy's premier combat institute. They filed into the orientation hall with the swagger of beings who thought they were the best their respective planets had to offer. Bonnie watched from the instructor's gallery as Hixaline delivered the standard welcome speech about excellence, dedication, and the proud history of the Institute. The commander was good at this, inspiring without being sappy, demanding without being cruel. Then Hixaline gestured toward the instructor's gallery. You'll be learning from the finest combat specialists in known space. I encourage you to approach your training with humility, respect, and an open mind. All the trainees' eyes tracked to the gallery, taking in the assembled instructors. A Bolgurath who could punch through hull plating. A Pelthari master of nerve strike techniques. An Enthrene who moved like liquid death. And Bonnie, human, standing there with coffee in hand and looking like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. She saw the looks, the dismissive glances, the subtle body language that said, that one's not a threat. Saw the new recruits mentally categorizing her as support staff, maybe an academic specialist, definitely not a real instructor. One of them, a young Null Thixian, fresh-faced and confident, leaned toward his neighbor and whispered something. Bonnie couldn't hear it, but she could read lips well enough. Why is there a human in the instructor's gallery? His neighbor shrugged, equally confused. Bonnie smiled into her coffee. This again, she thought. Fun. After the orientation, she was filing out with the other instructors when Ormhack approached. He was moving better now, back to full mobility, though he still moved a bit carefully around the ribs she'd targeted. New batch looks eager, he said. They always do at this stage. I was thinking, he paused, choosing his words carefully. My combat fundamentals class needs a guest instructor next week. Someone to demonstrate adaptive fighting techniques. Would you be interested? Bonnie raised an eyebrow. You want me to teach Nalthixian trainees? I want them to learn what I learned, before they make the same mistakes I did. He smiled slightly. Also, watching their faces when you walk in will be extremely satisfying. Petty revenge. I like it. I prefer to think of it as hands-on education, Ormhack said, echoing her words back to her. They walked together through the corridors of Helix 9, past the training facilities and observation decks, past the recreation areas where off-duty trainees were already starting to gather, past the crucible where a maintenance crew was still working on repairs, and the graffiti-marked barrier that read, Bonnie's Reminder. Somewhere in the facility, new trainees were settling into their quarters, confident in their abilities, certain of their place in the natural order. They'd learn. They always did. Because the thing about humans, the thing the galaxy was slowly, painfully coming to understand, was that they didn't fit into neat categories. They weren't prey or predator, specialist or generalist, warrior or scholar. They were all of it and none of it, adaptable enough to be whatever the situation required. And they were absolutely terrible at knowing when to quit. Bonnie finished her coffee, tossed the cup in a recycling unit, and headed toward her office to start planning next week's lesson. She had some ideas about teaching adaptive combat that were going to be educational. Also painful. But mostly educational. Behind her, the crater in the crucible floor waited, a permanent reminder that sometimes the scariest predators were the ones that didn't look scary at all. They were just the ones that never stopped coming.